Caleb, your take about the Georgia game is?
My take about the Georgia game is, after questioning whether or not Tennessee and why they weren't blitzing and bringing enough pressure against Georgia, I have been forced to come to the conclusion that Tennessee did not reveal everything against Georgia, knowing they had a college football playoff to come. Whereas Georgia and Mike Bobo threw the kitchen sink at Tennessee and unveiled everything about
And why
their
would
offense.
he do that?
Oh, I think Mike Bobo was feeling the heat after the loss to Ole Miss. And more importantly, Georgia had more to lose in that game than Tennessee did. Tennessee had one loss. Georgia had two. So at the time, Georgia losing could effectively knock them out of the college football playoff. Tennessee losing, everybody knew that that was going to put them in danger of getting knocked out of the college football playoff, and they were going to need help. But Dave, you just play the odds and the likelihood. It's not likely that that chalk holds the rest of the way and you don't get in. So yes, they took a little bit of a risk. But I think for Tennessee and Tim Banks, I think they decided, let's let Mike Bobo show us everything he has, and we're not going to reveal everything we have. Tim Banks, by the way, didn't blitz at all in that game. And Carson Beck has shown that he's not good under pressure. Why wouldn't he do that? Tim Banks actually is one of the things Tim Banks is known for, by the way, is very complex blitz packages. Isn't that one of his strengths?
Yes.
Doesn't do it one time in that game. Mike Bobo unveils everything. There's how many misdirection passes to the tight ends did you see in that game?
You did not see the same type of play that now I agree. I'll give you that. Tennessee didn't do the same thing. I'm going to say that they had a game plan that didn't work. I don't think you hold back against Georgia. So we'll put that as a poll question. Did Vols hold back against Georgia? Yep. The college football playoff is coming up, or no, Vols just want to win. I'm going to go with Vols just want to win on this. By the way, we had Game No Bueno say that Caleb's insane takes is why I started to tune in every day. So that's pretty good stuff. But he really believes it. He's not doing this for some sort of show. I just don't believe you ever go into a game, especially in football. Now, Caleb kind of got me a little bit with the SEC basketball tournament that I think Rick Barnes may have thrown with his substitution patterns and what they did. Not thrown. That sounds like it's some sort of gambling reference. But let's say drug their feet a little bit.
What we said yesterday, they had a simple game plan that involved not exerting a lot of effort. And if they win anyway, then they'll take the win. But they're not going to go all in to win. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So are you talking from scheme, or are you talking, I mean, how would you drag your feet without sending the message to the team? Because that's the worst thing. If you went into a Wednesday, your last week of install, or your last day of install in a game week, that to me would be a bad signal to send to your team that, hey, it just doesn't feel like we're doing everything we could.
Okay, so I'm not so sure they were doing that against Georgia. Here's why it looks so different. I think Tennessee was doing against Georgia what they've done all year. Dave, how you've covered the NFL. Teams in the NFL all the time save things for the playoffs, right? They don't want to give things up. I think Tennessee was operating that way the whole year. I think Georgia, meanwhile, showed its entire hand against Tennessee, and that turned out to be the difference in the game. And I don't think Tennessee was willing to show its entire hand against Georgia in response any more than they would have been against any team. So there's a difference between not showing your entire hand and just having a basic game plan of not exerting any effort whatsoever because you don't care at all if you win. Rick Barnes in basketball, his was the latter. He literally told his players, jack up every three. Just shoot it when you get it. If it goes in, we'll advance. And if it doesn't, we get to rest. That's what he told his players clearly. I have no inside reporting on this guy, so I don't want to be sued for some libel statement by Rick Barnes. Okay. I don't want to be sued for defamation. But it was very obvious his game plan was just jack up threes and see if they go in.
Well, I think you said that before the game too, by the way.
Yes, I did. Tennessee didn't do anything different versus Georgia that they've done all year. But the philosophy all year has been, do everything you can to win with your talent. But if you can avoid it, don't try to show your entire hand because you have a playoff. That's not just Tennessee's strategy. That's every strategy for every team expecting to make the playoff. Tennessee knew that they were effectively in by the time they were going to visit Georgia that week. So they were doing everything that they've been doing the whole year. That doesn't mean they weren't throwing the game. Georgia, on the other hand, did the reverse. Georgia didn't want to show their whole hand. They had to show their whole hand because they had 2 losses, and a loss to Tennessee would have knocked them out of the playoff possibly. So that's where I'm at.
Now, you've also said this about other college football games. So let's get to that, as What the H is brought to you by Dynasty Pools and Spas. For Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount. Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas. There been any other games that you have seen, maybe Ohio State, Michigan, that you wondered if the team was really all into it because they're thinking, I'm already in, and why would you go all out schematically? Would that one qualify? And have there been any other games that you've seen that a coach just kind of drug his feet? Let's use drug his feet instead of thrown. How about that?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm willing to go throw with the Michigan game, honestly. And we spoke about this yesterday, guys. Ohio State did not want to go play in the Big Ten title game. They didn't want to go, and I don't blame them. Why waste an extra week of football when you don't have to? So I think they threw that game.
Okay, go ahead.
If they didn't, though, that is evidence of Michigan was going to throw the kitchen sink, right? That was Michigan's national championship game that day. And it's not like Michigan doesn't have talent. They're a year removed from winning a national title. So that was their national championship game. Ohio State wasn't about to throw the kitchen sink back to try to beat them. They have a playoff to worry about.
Well, you've got Angie fired up. She says, don't believe for 1 second Heupel didn't go all in to win. You don't want to lose any games, so you do all you can to win. Each loss is a possibility to be out of the playoffs or not to host a game. Now, Unsung says, don't say OSU threw that game against Michigan. The players at OSU literally treats a loss to Michigan like a death. That's true. Michael says, your culture becomes shaky if you're not going to win. So, Caleb, I got to agree with Michael and say that your take is that's
crazy.
And I understand where you're coming from. And I think it's doable in basketball, especially with a meaningless conference tournament. Just don't think with football you can send that message.
You have seen plenty of teams, Dave, not go all in the NFL regular season and go win the Super Bowl. Plenty of teams have done it, have just phoned it in at the end. Have they not, knowing that they were safe in the playoffs?
They have. Now, can I jump on your side for just a second?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so General Ursus says, deciding not to win games, especially big games, is a slippery slope. Tennessee wanted to win that game, and we wouldn't have had to worry whether or not we were going into the big dance. Now, I'm going to defend you for a second, Caleb. At the risk of being called
that's crazy.
This is a very mature team. There's some teams you couldn't even consider doing something like that with, but with this team, I don't think you ever had any doubt that they were going to bounce back. So, yes, you could do this. Now, you wouldn't do this in 2022. Tell me if I'm wrong, but you could do this with the mature roster that Tennessee has.
Yeah, and you wouldn't do it in 2022 because it's only a 4-team playoff. You do have to go all in.
True.
So, I mean, guys, I've told y'all what I'm trying to say is this. I'm not trying to say throwing the game or even not trying to win the game. No, I'm saying go all out to win the game. What I'm saying is this. This year, coaches have saved a little bit of extra juice for when they get to the playoff because every coach everywhere in the history of man does that in a sport when there's a playoff. I'm saying when Tennessee faced Georgia, Georgia had to dive into its playbook of the extra juice.
Well, they did. And let me ask you this when it comes to this whole concept. Would Josh Heupel's ahead of the curve offensively, right?
Absolutely.
It's been ahead of the curve in NIL. This would be ahead of the curve. So while I think that Angie was saying on the message board, well, it doesn't fit Heupel. It's not what he would do. I would actually argue that it would fit Heupel, whereas it wouldn't fit a Kirby Smart or a Nick Saban or a lot of other coaches. But it would fit Heupel because he's the type of guy, too, who plays the analytics game. He goes for it when there are times that I say,
that's crazy.
But I think he would fit the mold of that type of coach that would at least think that. I think he sees it big picture. I'm not saying he did, and I'm not even saying I believe it, but I think he fits the mold of somebody that would do that. I think Steve Spurrier would do something like this.
Oh, yes, Steve Spurrier absolutely would. I think there was a belief when Florida and Tennessee went into overtime in '98 when Tennessee won. People were actually shocked that Spurrier decided to play defense first after winning the coin toss, because Spurrier was probably the only coach that might have actually considered to play offense first during that time. So I agree. Now, we can have the debate, did Tennessee, was that playing with too much fire because you lost a home playoff game? So would you rather, and here's my question, Dave, would you rather have the home playoff game or have that extra juice in your playbook that no one's seen yet?
I'd rather be at home. I mean, I think that's worth 3 or 4 points, and I believe that Tennessee's hitting a stride offensively. So I'd rather have the home game as opposed to something new. Now, if this ends up happening, that Tennessee, let's say, beats Ohio State, whether it's on the road or at home, and then somehow plays Georgia, and they beat Georgia because they have a different look defensively, then Caleb, you can't just necessarily come on and crow and say you're right, because you would expect any football team to make adjustments. And I believe that Tim Banks will make adjustments before they face Georgia, if they ever do again this season.
I think so too, but I guess what I'm getting at is there is going by the script to win football games, which most coaches do, and then throwing the kitchen sink out in a game. What I'm trying to say more is that Georgia threw out the kitchen sink, and Tennessee was not either prepared or willing to throw out their kitchen sink in that game. Because I think isn't there a difference, Dave, between throwing out the kitchen sink where, okay, you throw out the kitchen sink if you got to get to the playoff. You do, right? You got to throw everything you got.
I'll give you an example. How about this? The Tennessee-Florida game in 2001 where John Chavis used the Prowler package. You wouldn't use that earlier in the year against if it's Florida in September. That was, of course, 9/11. So he threw out the kitchen sink. That's not a look you give if you've got more meaningful games to play, or at least you never play that again. Now, it fit to what Steve Spurrier did, but yeah, that's throwing out the kitchen sink knowing that you're, what were they, I think a 14.5-point underdog.
18.5-point underdog.
18.5 points. So that's when you throw the kitchen sink out, right?
Yes, exactly. That's a great example. You're right. That's exactly when you throw it out. But if the difference is between a home or a road playoff game, do you throw out the kitchen sink at that point, knowing you're going to the playoff?
I would do everything I could to host the home playoff game. I would do everything I could to win each and every week by as much of a margin as I could, because I think style points are going to matter, even though they shouldn't.